This is number one. And I've also taken note of those who are present for the promise that I made. It's very simple. Today, I have Wayne Ewing and Caddy. What's your first name, Caddy, or your last name? Or is this just your stage name, Caddy?
No, Professor. My name is Katie Ann Thompson.
Katie Ann Thompson. Okay, so that's what the
Yes.
stage name. Okay. All right. Welcome, Katie, and welcome, Wayne Ewing. And I have another person here, Mr. O. Felix Obi. Mr. Felix Obi is going to be your instructor for this class. Okay, Mr. Felix Obi comes to us with extensive experience in international business, international trade, and also in government. Currently, he is working with the government of the state of Virginia. Am I correct?
Maryland.
Oh, Maryland, with the state of Maryland, sorry. He is very knowledgeable in the politics and economics of international trade and international economics because he has extensive experience. And so he's going to be the person from whom you will receive instructions from now onwards. Professor Obi, do you have any kind of lesson for the students, or you just want to introduce yourself and let them know that you take it from here?
Thank you very much, Professor Ebwe. Can everybody hear me very well?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
I can.
Thank you very much also, Caddy and Wayne. It is really an honor and a privilege to take care of this class and teach this class and be able to teach the next generation of leaders for the United States and I hope the international community. So I thank the director of the department, Professor Ebwe, for the opportunity. I really am very convinced that this is going to go very well. I should let you know that I came of age in New York City, and part of what informed my choice of graduate school was I'm a big, and still is a very big basketball fan, was the former New York Knicks center, and his name is Patrick Ewing, and he played for the New York Knicks. So it is revealing and quite telling that the first student who logged in, his last name is Ewing. So I'll take that as a sign that things are going to go just great in this class. As Professor Ebwe mentioned, I am very passionate about international trade and the political economy that underscore it. What I hope and intend to do in this class, and I read through the introductions, is to bring this class home, to not make the subjects that we're going to cover an abstract conversation, but to draw a direct linkage between our current conditions, the choices we make, our prospects for the future, and how they influence international trade, and how local politics can influence US national policy, and how collectively national policies can influence the political economy of the international framework. And that's my hope and expectation, so that after this class, folks will begin to see how our individual choices really affect the world that we live in. This week, obviously, our conversation is going to center on the International Monetary Fund. And I'd like to touch on some of the technical aspects of the IMF. And again, as I've promised to do, I'm going to attempt to link it to the choices that we make. I suspect that most people in the class are no more than 3 generations removed from their country of ancestry. I also suspect that most people in the class will find that the relatives and the peoples we know from our country of ancestry don't exactly have the same economic opportunities as we may have in the United States. And that's really at the core of the class. It is how the international economic system is structured, and the ability to produce and compete in a measured, rules-based system. Do we have an idea what the IMF means?
I do not.
Okay.
Yeah.
IMF means International Monetary Fund. The International Monetary Fund was set up in 1944 as part of what is called the Bretton Woods Conference, which was led by the United States. And it was in response to the Great Depression and the ravages of the Second World War. What the framers of the Bretton Woods Institution framework envisioned was a healthier international competition, where countries who have comparative advantages are able to manufacture at the lowest possible cost and sell those goods and services to other countries who will then sell other goods and or services that they're able to produce with comparative advantage. Do we understand what comparative advantage means?
Where like one country has just well, as you say, a comparable advantage over another, or when it comes to financials, I suppose.
Absolutely. So, for instance, the state of California, Silicon Valley, as an example, has a comparative advantage in information technology competence relative to most other places in the world, especially the United States. So it will stand to measure, for instance, that Silicon Valley concentrate on making computer parts and computer software, while Nebraska, for instance, focus on producing corn and corn-based ethanol and or cornflakes. And then Nebraska can sell corn to California, and California can sell computer-based software and etc. to Nebraska. So that is taking advantage of your comparative advantage. You have an advantage toward relative to other people. Sometimes also it may also turn out that California can produce corn just as well as Nebraska, but because computers pay better, it will be prudent for California to concentrate on producing computers and then allow Nebraska to take the lead in producing corn. So that's a little bit, this is just really an attempt to bring this home so that we can begin to appreciate how this impact our daily lives influence the IMF and the global trading system. So as I mentioned, in 1944, 44 founding countries came together to found the Bretton Woods institutions, especially the World Bank Group and the International Monetary Fund. IMF is a cooperative monetary organization. So what it essentially does is to ensure the stability of international monetary system. And what I mean by that is that the exchange rate and international payment systems that inform international trade. It manages challenges of economic development and globalization. And the three crucial ways that IMF does this, and I know, again, this is risking sounding fairly abstract, but again, I will bring it home. The three key activities that the IMF engages in to facilitate challenges of economic development and globalization is lending, surveillance, and capacity building. So it lends to governments in distress, and then it maintains a surveillance of the international system to be able to project where challenges may exist and be able to proffer policy solutions that may ameliorate or avoid those economic challenges or financial challenges altogether. These activities, as I mentioned, promote policy and strategy. So let's say that a surveillance system finds that X exists, then the question becomes, what policies can the IMF engage in to begin to address those challenges? What strategy can the international financial system adopt to begin to address, avoid, or ameliorate the challenges that IMF envisions? So the IMF is based on a quota system where governments have a quota based on their economic size. And the primary tool by which IMF addresses global challenges is the balance of trade. And here's what I mean by that, and I'm really going to try to bring it home now. If you don't mind my asking, between Caddy and Wayne, do you guys know your country of ancestry? I know we're all Americans, but we're from somewhere else originally.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing?
So my dad, he's from Trinidad and Tobago, and my mom, she's Puerto Rican.
Excellent. Caddy, what about you?
My parents, they're both from Jamaica. I'm from Jamaica as well.
Excellent. So here is a good way to look at it. Let's say Jamaica imports. Let's say Jamaica's total exports are worth $3 billion. So the total value of what Jamaica exports to the world, goods, service, $3 billion. But the total value of what Jamaica imports from the international markets is $3.5 billion. You could tell there is a problem. Jamaica will not have enough foreign exchange. It will be $500 million shy of the foreign exchange that it needs to pay for the imports that its domestic market demands. What would also happen, and this is getting a little complicated, but I'm just going to touch on it a little bit, is that typically what would happen is that inflation would occur because there are not going to be enough goods to meet the domestic market. And when you have few goods and too many people chasing the same goods, the price goes up. But setting that aside for a second, what will then happen is that the IMF will step up and say to Jamaica, here are the structural challenges that you face. You have, for instance, a bloated public sector. You do not collect enough taxes. And they would make a number of recommendations to IMF, and IMF will make a number of recommendations to Jamaica, and these are called structural adjustments that IMF will recommend. And we can debate about the fairness and the effectiveness of these structural recommendations. But what I suspect cannot be argued is the necessity for those structural adjustments. Because if you're spending more than you're making, there is a problem. And that's a problem that needs to be fixed. Even if you got a credit facility, the question then becomes, how do you pay it off? So this is what the IMF will do. Then the IMF will extend credit facilities to Jamaica. Based on the country's level of economic development, they may qualify for concessionary loans from the IMF. These are generally discounted rate loans. So IMF is known as a lender of last resort. When countries typically will put out a bond and raise money that way. When the country has run out of options, as happened recently in Sri Lanka as an example, and I think Pakistan, then IMF will step in. This is really important to keep the global trading system going because, and it's not really altruism. This is important to ensure that markets don't seize up. Think about it this way. If Jamaica, taking this example, imports 3.5 billion worth of goods and services, and somehow it's unable to pay for these services, that means there are countries all over the world who have lost a market of 3.5 billion. That would then trigger, quite likely, a layoffs in whatever sectors these countries exist and whatever these products are. And this will trigger another round of economic decline because of the multiplier effect of money. Do we understand what multiplier effect of money is?
Not exactly, but I think I can like infer from just what it is, what it implies.
Please take a stab at it. This is really a conversation.
Yeah, so as more losses occur, it's just gonna keep stacking up multiplicatively as well. So over time, it increases the amount of loss that is occurring.
Excellent. So here's another way to think of it. So there are direct and indirect jobs that come from an economic activity. So if a plant that supplies a widget to Jamaica has to lay off workers because Jamaica is no longer able to pay for those widgets, those workers that they lay off may have children who are in private school. Because the parents no longer have income, they are going to pull their children out of the private school. If enough of that happens, then the private school would have to lay off some teachers because they don't have as many students as they used to. It gets even more challenging. Most private schools have uniforms. That's going to be less uniforms that would have to be purchased. And that will lead to a reduction of income for tailors who make the uniforms. When the tailors lose their jobs and the factory workers who make the widget that Jamaica buys loses their jobs as well, they are likely to use Uber or public transportation because they have no job to go to. That leads to a loss of revenue for the Uber driver and the loss of revenue for, say, the municipal public transportation system. Eventually, for the municipal public transportation system, if it collects less revenue than its operating budget, it may have to raise fares. So there is a multiplier effect that occurs in a country that may seem unconnected to Jamaica, but simply because the Jamaican economy is failing. This is also called the contagion effect. Of course, I am dramatizing this a little bit for effect, simply because the Jamaican market may not be big enough to create this level of contagion. But this is not very dissimilar to what happened for different reasons during the global financial crisis. But I say this to bring home how the international trading system affects our quality of life sitting in New York City, sitting in Maryland, and living in the United States. How global trade influences the productivity and the market dynamics of our domestic markets. So IMF then provides money for balance of trade payment. It would help Jamaica make up the balance of trade in this example. The unit of account for IMF is called SDR, which is Special Drawing Rights. SDR is calculated on a daily basis based on a basket of currencies. And the basket of currencies and the level of SDR is calculated. The composition of the basket of currencies and the levels of SDR is calculated every 5 years. Currently, I believe it includes the United States has the highest SDR. I believe China now has the third highest. I think the second is Japan, and then fourth is Germany. And the currencies are US, Euro, Japanese yen, and Chinese renminbi are the major currencies that make up the special drawing rights of the IMF. So each country has two separate SDR accounts. Every member of the IMF. There is the holding account, which is the amount of money the country has contributed to the IMF. That money earns interest. And that is important to understand that the benefits of IMF. So not only does it stabilize the global trading system, not only does it stabilize the fiscal, provides fiscal stability for sovereign states, it also generates some profits for its shareholders. So as I mentioned, there are two categories of SDR accounts. The first is a holding account which earns interest. The other is an allocation account, which is an allocation. In this case, an allocation will be made to Jamaica, going with the example that I made. That allocation will be made to Jamaica, and Jamaica would pay interest on that allocation that is extended to it. So if you receive an SDR allocation, you are going to pay interest on it because it's a credit facility. If, on the other hand, you have an SDR holding, you are going to earn interest on that holding. And that's how the whole system stays solvent, among other programs. So for countries also, and this is where we can have a little bit of conversation and we can lead into the last week's conversation, we can dovetail into it. Poor countries have opportunities for concessional loans. Do we understand what a concessional loan may contemplate?
No, I do not.
Okay, so a concessional loan is a loan that is extended at below market rate. Obviously, the challenge is that countries who will require concessional loan, most of them are in the global south. And we had those conversations, and I was privileged to read through them last week. Those countries need assistance. But you also don't want to create a moral hazard by making the money free. And you also want to keep the system solvent. So for most credit facilities extended by the IMF, there is interest to be paid on it. And here's what I mean by moral hazard. So if any of us now have an expensive gold Rolex watch, let's say it's worth $100,000, I suspect we're probably going to buy a safe and put it in that safe and make sure that safe is locked at all times. So we're going to take care of it. What if an insurance company shows up and says, hey, for $1 every quarter, I can insure your Rolex for the full value. And you go, this is a scam. And it turns out it's not a scam. So once you pay your $1 every 3 months, God forbid you were to lose your Rolex, the insurance company will buy you a brand new Rolex. Chances are you're not going to be very particular about locking up that Rolex inside the safe as you used to. And this is what economists will call a moral hazard. So the very instrument that is supposed to protect your investment can cause you to be lack of a better expression, reckless about the use of that instrument. So and how this translates to extending credit is, if a country mismanages its economy, and at the end of that process, the company gets bailed out by the IMF, and it just doesn't cost that country anything extra than to pay back the loan, it might remove the incentive for that country to engage in sound economic management, and that's moral hazard, because it has nothing to lose. If things go bad, well, I'll get free money from the IMF. So that is also, as we have this conversation, there are going to be keywords and buzzwords that and phrases that are going to come up as we have these classes, especially during office hours and Tuesdays, that I hope that you would jot down and keep that in your arsenal of economic languages that you employ as you engage the public. And when you say those things, they'll look at you and go, wow, that must be a Medgar Evers student. And you go, yeah, well, we roll like that. So one of those words that I'd like for you to keep in mind is moral hazard. And it translates whether you're a nursing student, a business student, or a science student, or an economist interested in global financial architecture. Any questions so far?
No.
No.
Patty, what about you?
No, Professor.
So can I ask what our career goals are and our stage of academia at Medgar Evers? Are we juniors, seniors, sophomore? Where are we? And
Yeah.
what's our major?
My major is in computer science. I'm a senior. This is my last semester, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am also a senior. My major is accounting, and this is my second to last semester.
Excellent. So do you guys have an idea what you want to do post-graduation? You want to go to grad school, get a job, make some money, travel the world?
I definitely want to go to grad school, but I think I will need a little break. But definitely I need a job in my field.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah. For me, it's pretty much the same thing. Just get a job in my field. Look for them.
So we have an accountant and we have a computer scientist to be. By this time next year, both of you would be at your professional destination. So here is and this is what I really want to do, and this is why I asked those questions. As I said, I want this class to have practical application, regardless of our major. Obviously, if you're a business major, if you're a finance major, if you're an economics major, there might be a longer runway for what you can do with the class. But here's how I want you to think of this. So for Wayne, who is going to be a computer scientist, correct?
Yes.
Here's how to look at this. As we speak, the United States passed what is called the CHIPS Act a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And New York State is going to be a big beneficiary of the CHIPS Act, thanks to Senator Schumer. What this proposes to do would be to set up chips manufacturing, high-end chips that are typically the preserve of Taiwan, set up such manufacturing plants in the United States. This is so that the United States would have what is called supply chain resilience. Chips are from our cell phone to the computers that we're logged on to our cars to pretty much every facet of our life runs on microchip. And we now know from COVID that disruptions of the international our supply chain can really disrupt markets and disrupt economic activity. This is how global trade can impact your employment prospects. And this is also how global trade can enhance your employment prospects as a computer scientist in New York State.
Yeah.
So because the United States is concerned that for a number of reasons, China and Taiwan may have come into conflict. And should that happen, it would disrupt the microchip industry. And that will disrupt a whole slew of economies. Remembering the illustration I made about the multiplier effect of economic activity,
Yeah.
and how that can, resonate through the U.S. economy. So because of international trade, and to mitigate some of the potential challenges of international trade, New York City is going to be abundant in, at least relative to today, in high-end computer science jobs in as early as 2 years from now. So it will seem to me that you're getting your degree just in time. And there is going to be a market for the skills that you're acquiring at Medgar Evers. And I say this again as part of my effort to bring the class home to what we do and what we aspire to do. With respect to Caddy, who is going to be an accountant, I'm a business major, first year of undergrad. I'm in a finance class, and my professor says to me, if your cousin comes to you and says, loan me $1, 1 year from now, I would pay you back $1.05. And you are absolutely sure that your cousin will pay you back $1.05 exactly a year from now. That's not a question. And then you go to your accountant, and your accountant says to you, you should do it. You are going to make 5 cents. So go ahead, and we're sure your cousin is going to repay you. And you go to your finance guy, and your finance guy says to you go to your finance guy, your accountant says do it, and your finance guy says don't do it. Then you go, why? I trust my cousin. He says, no, this has nothing to do with trust. You are going to lose 5 cents. And you go, how is that? My cousin is going to pay me $1.05. So how am I going to lose 5 cents? I'm going to make 5 cents.
Be due to like inflation or something?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So the question is, what is the rate of inflation? If the rate of inflation is going to be 10%, then 1 year from now, that dollar will be worth $1.10. Right? So if I get paid $1.05, I could no longer, what I could buy today for that $1, 1 year from today, I couldn't buy it with $1.05. I will be 5 cents short. So I'll be making an economic loss of 5 cents. So when I said earlier that the IMF conducts surveillance, it looks at the rate of inflation in regions, it looks at the rate of inflation in countries, and it looks at the macroeconomic conditions and is able to make those projections. So these are decisions that you and I make on a daily basis about the lend, don't lend, cousin wants, cousin doesn't want. It is really fundamentally not very different from what the IMF does and what it has to consider. And the consequences are not very dissimilar. So obviously, in our case, if we lend the money at $1.05, we are going to be short 5 cents to buy the same products a year from now that we could have otherwise paid $1 for today. In the case of a national economy, it would have what we call a balance of trade deterioration. It means that the value of what it imports exceeds what it exports.
Right.
So this is all intended to bring economics to a practical level. This class, I hope, will bring economics and international trade and the political economy that inform it back to us, and we can identify it, and these are not abstract concepts. And as we move forward, I want us to keep this in mind as we have conversations. And I welcome conversations in class to say, well, what has this got to do with me? Mm-hmm. And that those will be a conversation that I would welcome. And that would let me know that you're thinking about the applicability of what we're learning in class. One last thing that I would want to put out there is we've had conversations, I've read through the conversations on political economy. Mm-hmm. And in the context of this class, political economy is obviously between nations and sub-regions. Mm-hmm. But I want you to think through a very popular political speak that is actually credited to a former New York State member of Congress. He says that all politics is local. Mm-hmm. All politics is local. Here's what I mean by that. The position, and we also had a conversation last week about whether the United States is a hegemony or not. The United States does not take abstract positions. The United States takes positions based on its internal political considerations and strategic interests. If you don't register your interest, it will not be considered as the United States contemplates how to engage the international community. As I mentioned, WIN's employment prospects has been significantly, in order of magnitude, improved because of Charles Schumer as the majority leader in the US Senate. Charles Schumer recognizes that he needs the vote of the youth. He's not doing it out of altruism. And he recognizes that this would positively impact employment prospects. And again, given the example that I gave about the multiplier effect of economic activity, because now Wayne is going to go buy a Tesla, and Tesla is going to sell him stuff. And now the Tesla dealership that he bought it, well, Tesla doesn't have dealerships. Tesla will now go buy more Twitter and more stuff. And that is the multiplier effect. So I want for us to recognize that when we talk about hegemony and when we talk about political economy, that we recognize that it all starts with domestic political consideration and strategic interest of the country will then inform how that country engages the world. The whole idea of NATO, and this is dovetailing again from pure economics, but to bring the value close to us. The whole value of NATO, as an example, is at its best, advancement of a security architecture that protects a rules-based international trading system. So when you order stuff on Amazon or the Chinese equivalent, I can't quite remember the name, there aren't any pirates waiting in the Pacific Ocean to hijack the ship. And there isn't a gang of terrorists that make the trading difficult. And that's what this class is about. And when hopefully by the end of the semester, you will read things in the news or hear things at work and you go, okay, I know why that happened. And that's really the real value. And for those who are in the business and economic and finance sector, they can become that more adept in the technical areas of and profession. So that's all I have for today. And I really do thank the both of you, especially for making our time to log in. I do appreciate your audience.
Thank you as well.
Thank you, Professor. Hello?
Thank you. Yes.
You mentioned the multiplier effect, and did you say a container effect? Or not?
Contagion.
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 Okay,
Contagion. Contagion.
got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So contagion, think about it as the influencer. You know how the flu happens? You get into a bus, somebody sneezes and all shucks. Everybody
Yes.
catches a cold. So that is a contagion, but think about it in economic terms, right? Or financial terms. So Jamaica sneezes, all of a sudden the person who makes widgets, and widget is an economic phrase for whatever goods or service somebody makes. Somebody who makes widgets has to lay off workers. And because they've laid off workers, and this is a different country now, but because they've laid off workers, the workers have to withdraw their children from private school. They are giving less, and they're spending less in Uber. So the Uber person now has less income. They're spending less on public transportation. The public transportation network may suffer a revenue loss. This is a contagion. It's an economic activity that happened in Jamaica that is now spreading to other parts of the world. And that's so no country is an island. I know literally Jamaica and Trinidad are islands, but in economic terms, we're all connected and no country is an island.
Yes.
Prof, over to you.
Okay. All right. So this is it for now. So as from next week, you may not be seeing my face on these office hours. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk with the professor, Obi, after this conversation. So thank everybody for coming. This lecture will be recorded. It is recorded, and so it will be posted. But I really would encourage everybody to try to come. As from next week, it should be from 6 o'clock.
Okay, so we start at 6 next week?
Yes, from next week, it should be from 6 o'clock. It was from 7 today because I had another session at 6 o'clock. But I'm going to now hand over everything to Professor B, and I'll do my own thing on my own side, and he'll do his own thing on his own side. Okay. All right.
I do have a question for Professor Obi. For the textbooks, is it necessary that we must have that textbook, or we can get information from the internet?
The textbook is available for free. Look at the syllabus; it's there.
It's there. Okay.
Yeah, it's there. Just download it and you have it.
Okay.
Okay. I think anyway, since this is gonna go to everybody in the class, they will know the textbook is in the syllabus section. Download it, and it's yours for free.
And for this week assignments, we only have 2 assignments, correct? I think one.
Look in the activities folder. You will see everything that you need to do. You have an assignment and a quiz, or a quiz. You have an assignment and a quiz, or a quiz and a discussion. So that's the way it's set up. If you have more than that, that's fine. But once the professor posts the announcement that this is what you have to do this week, go into the activities folder and you will see everything you have to do. You will see the assignment and the quiz, or the assignment, or the quiz and the discussion.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay. All right.
Thank you
so
much.
I will talk to the professor. I will end the session, and then I'll call the professor on the phone and talk with him.
Okay.
Okay. Have a good night.
Okay, bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.